From the moment the new owners moved into the sprawling Los Angeles mansion, once owned by John Michael Ozzy Osbourne, something about the house felt off. It wasn't the faded luxury or the slightly musty scent lingering in the hallways. It was subtler, quieter, a series of small, unnerving signs that something lingered long after the former owner had left. Within the first hour of settling in, the couple noticed the doors didn't always stay as they had been left. A closet door they were certain had been closed would stand ajar when they returned from unpacking boxes. At first, they blamed fatigue or a sloppy breeze through the open windows, but then it escalated. Footsteps echoed in rooms long empty, faint, uneven, and impossibly late at night. The couple tried to rationalize it. The house was large, the floorboards old. These things creaked. Still, one neighbor's casual comment made them pause. "You know," the neighbor said over the fence, "Ozzy, he liked his privacy. But some people say the house, it remembers things. Guests heard voices when he wasn't home. Objects moved on their own. Weird, right?" The couple laughed uneasily at first. But over the next few nights, subtle patterns emerged. One evening, while testing the house for strange phenomena, they left a small notebook open on the kitchen counter. They returned hours later to find a single line scribbled on the page, neat and unmistakably human. "Don't forget me." They tried a more controlled experiment. Security cameras were installed in key rooms, motion sensors too. Each time they left the house empty for hours, the footage showed inexplicable activity. Doors swinging, lights flicking on and off, a shadow moving across the living room floor that never appeared on the infrared sensors. It was never aggressive, never violent, just there, present, observing. Even the neighbors, initially skeptical, began to recount their own encounters. One elderly woman, living across the street, mentioned hearing a guitar riff at 2 a.m., faint but unmistakable, echoing across the neighborhood. Another neighbor claimed to see a figure pacing the balcony late at night, back straight, hair long, reminiscent of the rock star who once owned the home. Yet when questioned, nobody reported ever entering the house. By the third week, the couple noticed the most chilling sign. A sense of being watched even when alone in the backyard. A subtle weight in the air. A faint music humming through the walls. No amount of rational explanation, creaking wood, electrical glitches, or wind fully accounted for it. It was as if the house had retained pieces of its former owner, not as a ghost in the theatrical sense, but as a lingering imprint of a life once larger than the rooms themselves. They never found a definitive explanation. Psychologists might call it expectation and suggestion, skeptics, coincidence. But for the couple, every creak, every whisper of the wind through the eaves, every flicker of the lights became a reminder. In this house, Ozzy Osbourne hadn't completely gone. The music, the presence, the energy of him remained subtle, unnerving, and entirely real. Even weeks into their stay, the house seemed to settle around them like an organism, alive in ways they could not explain. The mornings began with strange patterns of condensation on the windows, delicate arcs that appeared overnight as if someone had traced them with careful fingers. The couple joked about Ozzy's fingerprints on the glass, but the humor was thin, nervous. By mid-afternoon, a warm breeze would filter through the open doors, carrying a faint, lingering scent, aged leather, faint perfume, and something indefinably metallic. Neither of them could place it, but it always brought goosebumps to their arms. The library became the center of unease. Tall shelves, heavy with old vinyl records and tour memorabilia, seemed to rearrange themselves ever so slightly overnight. A particular record, a first pressing of Blizzard of Oz, would lie askew on the shelf, then appear face up on the reading table in the middle of the night. The couple left a notebook beside it, jotting down times and dates. The record would always appear in a new location, perfectly centered, as if someone had taken the time to arrange it carefully, waiting to be seen. One evening, while inspecting the attic, the husband noticed the faint glow of light through a crack in the far wall. It wasn't the soft golden hue of the sunset, but cooler, almost silvery, reflecting off the dust particles in the air. He called to his wife, who approached slowly, her hand trailing along the railing. As they opened the creaking attic door, they found nothing, no lights, no wires, no explanation. Yet the air felt heavier, charged with a quiet intensity, and a single muted note of a guitar string, vibrating almost imperceptibly, hummed somewhere deep in the house. It was a tone that seemed familiar yet impossible to pinpoint, resonating in the chest like a memory you cannot recall. Sleep became a strange territory. The master bedroom, with its panoramic view of the sprawling gardens, often filled with the sounds of soft footsteps at night, pacing just outside the bed. The couple would wake to the subtle pressure of someone or something having leaned against the headboard, though no one was there. Shadows moved across the walls, but only at the edges of vision. When they looked directly, the darkness seemed to recede, leaving nothing but the faint outline of familiar furniture. They installed small motion detectors in the room, which never triggered, yet the feeling persisted, undeniable and chilling. One afternoon, attempting to rationalize the unease, the wife decided to conduct a simple experiment. She left a personal item, a leather jacket, on a chair in the living room and retreated upstairs to write in her journal. Hours later, when she descended, the jacket had moved to the center of the room, folded neatly as if placed by someone else. She called out, heart racing, but no response came, only the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant buzz of the city beyond the thick walls. Even the neighbors began to take note. The elderly man who lived a block away mentioned seeing lights flickering in the large bay windows late at night, in patterns that mimicked a kind of rhythm, almost musical. Another neighbor recalled hearing a faint, melodic hum while walking her dog past the property, a tune that lingered and then vanished into the night. None of the reports contained threats or violence, only a presence that felt alive, attentive, and distinctly human. The couple's curiosity deepened. They started leaving small objects in the hallways. Pens, notes, even a cup of tea. By the next morning, items were subtly rearranged, nothing dramatic, just shifted enough to make them question their own perception. One night, after returning from a dinner in the city, they found a simple message etched on a dusty shelf above the piano. I remember every note. The handwriting was careful, deliberate, not hurried or frantic. It bore the unmistakable weight of someone who had known the house intimately. The house itself seemed to breathe with the memory of its previous owner. Doors that were supposed to be locked could be found open in the morning. The piano, silent for hours, would occasionally emit the faintest echo of chords, never a full melody, just fragments, teasing, almost conversational. And always, there was the sense of being watched, not with malice, but with a kind of quiet scrutiny, like a presence lingering to observe the way the new occupants lived, moved, and reacted. Even rational explanations, drafts, uneven floors, faulty wiring, fell short. The air carried subtle warmth in one room, a coolness in another, shifting without cause. Footsteps, glances from shadows, music that started and stopped without touch. The house had a rhythm, a pulse, and the couple, whether they wanted to admit it or not, had become part of it. Yet, there was no anger, no threat, only presence, a careful, persistent imprint of a life that had once filled every corner of the property. And with each passing day, the couple began to feel less like owners and more like witnesses, their lives quietly intertwined with the lingering essence of the house's most famous resident, John Michael Osbourne. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. By the fourth week, the couple had begun to adjust to the rhythm of the house, though it was a rhythm they never fully understood. Every morning, the sunlight poured through the wide bay windows into the living room, highlighting the faint outline of a grand piano and casting shadows that seemed to stretch farther than the furniture warranted. The air smelled faintly of aged wood and dust, but beneath that was always an undertone they couldn't name, something earthy, almost like smoke from a distant fireplace long extinguished. It was never unpleasant, yet it carried a weight that made them pause as they moved through each room. The nights were the hardest. In the beginning, the footsteps were brief, hesitant. But over time, they became more deliberate, pacing slowly along the upper hallways and the staircases, always at the edges of hearing. The couple would lie awake, straining to hear the faintest echo, their hearts quickening with each creak of the floorboards. Sometimes the steps would stop just outside their bedroom, lingering, and then retreat in silence. The husband tried to rationalize it. Settling wood, the sound of the city, perhaps the wind through the large oak trees outside. Yet the precision, the rhythm felt too deliberate to be coincidence. One evening, the wife explored the music room, a space still untouched by the new owners, where Osbourne's collection of guitars rested on stands, the strings glinting faintly in the dim light. As she ran her fingers along the edge of a mahogany Les Paul, she felt a subtle vibration, almost a whisper of resonance that shouldn't have existed unless the instrument had been played. Her pulse quickened, and she stepped back, expecting someone behind her, but the room was empty. Then, faintly, the sound of a chord echoed through the walls, soft, like the house itself had struck the strings. The couple began keeping meticulous notes, cataloging every oddity. Doors opening and closing without cause, faint humming from rooms long abandoned, objects moving slightly but deliberately, as if nudged into place. Even the garden seemed to have its own patterns. One morning, the fountain in the backyard left dry by the previous owners had a thin layer of water collected in it, though the spout had been closed the night before. Dew patterns in the flower beds seemed to form arcs that made no sense with the morning sun. When they asked the gardener if he had noticed anything, he shook his head but admitted he sometimes felt the sensation of being watched while pruning near the main house. The security cameras, initially thought to be a definitive test, proved both fascinating and confounding. In one recording, the couple saw the chandelier above the dining table sway gently, though there had been no draft. In another, a shadow moved across the hallway floor in a shape vaguely humanoid, yet too large and elongated to be human. The cameras picked up nothing else, no infrared detection. No heat signature, only the unsettling movement caught in ordinary light. Even ordinary tasks became tinged with unease. Preparing coffee in the morning, the wife sometimes found the sugar container moved a few inches to the left, or a coffee mug placed perfectly at the edge of the counter where it hadn't been. In the evenings, she often caught a flicker of movement in the corner of her eye, a figure in the hallway vanishing when she turned her head. The husband reported similar experiences while working on his laptop late at night. The faint sound of laughter, low and dry, echoing down the hall, never directly audible, but felt as much in the chest as in the ears. They began experimenting carefully, leaving small notes in rooms where the activity seemed most frequent. One day, in the master bathroom, a sticky note appeared in the middle of the tile floor. "I'm still here." The handwriting was deliberate, perfectly formed, not rushed, carrying a strange familiarity as if the house itself had remembered Osbourne's presence and was now communicating in his stead. Even the neighbors began to confirm subtle phenomena. The woman who lived across the street often heard faint music drifting from the house late at night. Snippets of riffs, low guitar chords, not loud enough to call the police, but persistent enough to feel tangible. A man jogging past the property once reported seeing the upper balcony light flicker in a pattern resembling a solitary figure pacing slowly, hair long and loose, the outline unmistakable against the warm glow of the upstairs windows. Despite all of this, there was no fear of malice. The house did not push or strike. It did not scream or rattle violently. It was patient, observant, as if testing the boundaries of the new inhabitants, learning their routines, and asserting, in subtle, undeniable ways, that its history was not erased. The couple increasingly felt that they were no longer simply living in the house, they were guests in a space still inhabited by the echoes of the life it had once held, by a presence that lingered in the walls, the floors, the air itself. And with each passing day, each small note, each inexplicable movement, the sense deepened. This was not a house haunted by a ghost in the traditional sense. It was haunted by memory, by repetition, by the tangible remnants of a life lived fully, loudly, and indelibly. And the house, it seemed, was determined to ensure that memory remained alive. Over time, the couple began to adjust their routines to the rhythms of the house. The subtle presence that had once startled them now felt like an uninvited but constant companion. Morning light slanted through the windows, catching the dust motes that swirled lazily in the air, illuminating the living room in a golden haze. The house felt awake, almost sentient, as if it watched and listened to their every movement, cataloging their patterns, their small habits. One evening, the wife lingered in the music room, staring at the wall of guitars. Each instrument, polished and silent, seemed to hum faintly in response to the creak of her steps. She placed her hand gently on the neck of a black Les Paul, the wood cool and smooth beneath her fingers. A single note, almost imperceptible, vibrated through the air. She froze, waiting for some logical explanation. A draft, a loose string, but there was none. The note hung in the room for a heartbeat longer than it should have, then faded into silence. She felt a chill, not of fear, but of recognition, as if the house was reminding her that it had heard this note countless times before. The husband began experimenting more deliberately, leaving small objects in rooms where strange occurrences had been most frequent. A notebook on the dining table, a pen balanced on the edge of a counter, a photograph turned face down. Each morning, the items were shifted, rearranged, or inscribed with faint markings. One day, a simple message appeared on the back of a photo of the house's front gates. Remember the music. The handwriting was neat, deliberate, and entirely human. No prank, no coincidence could explain it. Even the nights were no longer simply unsettling, they were strangely alive. Footsteps paced in the hallways above, soft and deliberate, sometimes stopping outside the bedroom, sometimes retreating slowly. Shadows danced just beyond the corner of vision, vanishing when looked at directly. Lights flickered unpredictably, but always in patterns, almost rhythmic, like a pulse echoing through the walls. The couple no longer tried to rationalize these things. Instead, they observed, documented, and accepted them as part of the house's character, part of its ongoing dialogue with the life it had once contained. Neighbors, too, began to note subtle signs. The elderly woman across the street described hearing low, melodic humming through the trees late at night. The jogger reported fleeting glimpses of a figure pacing the upper balcony, hair long and wild, outlined by the faint glow of the upstairs windows. No one claimed to see a ghostly figure fully. No one heard a scream or saw violence, but the presence was undeniable, persistent, and unmistakably human. As weeks turned into months, the couple developed a quiet respect for the house. It was as if the very walls remembered John Michael Osbourne not as a specter, but as an energy, a memory embedded in the floorboards, the staircases, the air. Each subtle movement, each faint sound, was a conversation with the past. They discovered small quirks: how the living room sofa would shift slightly toward the window after they left, how the piano keys would echo a note if brushed by the wind through a cracked window, how shadows seemed to form shapes that recalled the long-ago life that had filled the home with music and laughter. One night, the couple sat together on the balcony, overlooking the softly lit gardens. The wind carried a faint scent of aged leather and smoke, the same odor that had first unsettled them. Somewhere inside the house, a single guitar string vibrated, sending a low, resonant hum through the floor. Neither of them spoke, but they both felt the message. The house was alive with memory, with history, with Ozzy's indelible presence. Not threatening, not vengeful, just there, persistent, a living testament to a life once lived at full volume. They realized that fear had long since given way to fascination. The house was not haunted in the traditional sense. It did not seek to harm or frighten. It simply remembered, and in remembering, it invited the living to acknowledge what had come before. And in that quiet acknowledgement, the couple found a strange peace. They had not inherited a house, they had inherited its memory, its pulse, its presence. And in that presence, Ozzy Osbourne remained, not as a ghost of flesh and bone, but as the enduring rhythm of a life that refused to be forgotten. The house never stopped watching. The faint echoes of laughter, the distant chords, the careful rearrangement of objects all continued, subtle, deliberate, and alive. And the couple, though they sometimes still felt a chill, understood one fundamental truth. Some places remember you, and some memories, like music, never fade. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story.